Hello and good morning everyone, and thank you for joining our Okta webinar today. So I'm joined here by Chris England from Okta and John Wilkins from Bytes.
Morning. Okta are a new partnership for Bytes, but it covers a need that we're seeing more increasingly in our customer base. They're the Gartner Magic Quadrant leaders in ID as a service. Their solution helps clients bridge the gap between the user directory and their cloud or web-based applications and services. And this makes it easier and quicker to implement new applications by providing secure sign-on and user provisioning services. This is particularly relevant for our Office 365 customers, among others. If you want to find out more, then please speak to your Bytes account manager after the webinar, and I'm sure they'll have more details for you. So I'll hand over to Chris.
Hello everybody, and thanks for taking time out of your busy days. I'm Chris England from Okta, and thanks guys from Bytes for inviting me along today. Today we're going to focus on how to extend Active Directory for Office 365, and rather than giving you just an Okta pitch here, I really want to sort of give you a balanced view of what's going on in the market and what your options are for extending Active Directory to Office 365. So there are many different approaches you can look at. There's some free software you can use. There are cloud-based solutions like Okta. And I really want to give you a balanced view and contrast some of that. So today in the webinar, we're going to go through some key topics here, which are looking at just the general trends around Office 365 adoption, and then contrast looking at the views of what is available for you to do that, and look at Microsoft's approach and contrast that with Okta's approach, and more than happy to answer your questions as we go through. Before I start, we've been seeing a lot around cloud adoption, certainly here in Europe, the UK, and in the US. And if you look at the most average US organizations now, we're seeing the average number of cloud applications adopted there are 21 this year as well, and many industry analyst reports support that number as well. We commissioned a survey over here in the UK of 205 large enterprises, and we found the average number of cloud applications being adopted and deployed in the UK at the moment is around 8. So whilst many of you guys will be looking at deploying things like Office 365, you will probably be looking at deploying other cloud applications as well. So, whether that's Citrix, whether that's Box, ServiceNow, Salesforce, etc., Workday, you are probably going to be deploying more than just Office 365. And when I speak to many customers and do polls on regular webinars that I run, I find there are common problems that people are facing now. As you start deploying multiple applications in the cloud, people are like, how the hell do I extend Active Directory out to support this? There are many different approaches. Do I use Microsoft's approach? Do I use Salesforce's approach? Do I kind of bundle together my own approach around this? How do I solve the single sign-on problem around accessing all these different applications with this plethora of usernames and passwords? How do I support bring my own device or choose my own device, mobile type deployments, and enable access to my partners and customers as well as employees and contractors? So this big question of how you extend Active Directory to the cloud comes up quite a lot in Office 365 deployment. So today we are going to focus on Office 365, but clearly we can talk about other areas. And what we're going to show today is looking at what approaches are available for extending Office 365 out, extending AD to Office 365 in the cloud. Look at things like ADFS, which stands for Active Directory Federation Services, but I'll just say ADFS from now on, and DirSync, which is a directory synchronization tool. These are free products from Microsoft. I'm going to jump into these in a second. You can get those up and running. It does require that you invest in your own hardware infrastructure, software, etc., and you've got to configure that, and we'll have a look at that in a second. And then look at alternative approaches. Microsoft are great working with partners and building out an ecosystem around their community so that people can add additional capability to all their products, like Office 365. And I'm going to show you today Okta's approach to that, which is a free solution you can use at the end of this webinar, a cloud-based solution that does a lot of that stuff that you'd want with ADFS, but goes above and beyond for things like mobile deployment, solving that single sign-on problem. And if we look at the cloud Office penetration, there's some interesting statistics that have come out from many analysts, and this is just what I picked from Gartner, showing that we're kind of on the tip of a changing point here within our industry. There are many early adopters now around different industries that have started deploying cloud-based Office-type solutions like Office 365, but the prediction is certainly over the next sort of 5 years we're going to see significant growth there in many other industries as well. And when we look at this report in a little bit more detail, you will have a copy, of course, to these slides, so I'm just zipping through them. We can see that the Office market evolution is radically changing here. If you look at the compound growth over the next sort of 5-7 years of people using Office-based applications, you can see there's going to be growth, obviously, in the amount of people using them, But what you can see there is the big change is everyone's moving predominantly more to investing in cloud-based solutions versus non-cloud solutions. So there is a big change going on. And when we talk about Office 365, there's always a bit of confusion about what Office 365 actually is and what we need to extend Active Directory out to provide integration to this cloud service. And you can think of Office 365 very simply. There are the client-based applications that we all have been using for many years now in our careers. We all know the thick clients of PowerPoint, Excel, Word, etc. But what Microsoft also provide now in the later generations of the products are these web-based versions of those applications as well. On the server side, though, what we're all used to is in our own data centers, deploying our own on-prem servers to run SharePoint, Link, Exchange, etc. And really what Office 365 is doing is pushing that from our on-prem infrastructure to a cloud-based service as well. So Office 365 really is a bundle of all the different client applications. It's not just the web-based client, but also the thick clients. But predominantly the big change here is moving from on-prem servers to cloud-based services. So let's have a look at what options we've got for extending Active Directory for Office 365. The kind of key challenge we see in many organizations is you've got your Windows Server environment behind your firewall on the right-hand side there, running your AD environment, and you want to extend that out to provide integration to your Office 365 tenant, to provide integration with all the different applications out there as well. So the big question, of course, comes up of what options have I got to do that, and what approaches can I take? And I say we're going to dive into that a little bit here. So at a high level, really, this is Microsoft's recommended approach. First thing you need to do is look at how do we provision users from behind the firewall out to Office 365. So we need some method of actually moving our users from Active Directory out to Office 365 and basically doing this provisioning, creation of those particular accounts and synchronizing information between them. The other area we need to think about, of course, is things like Exchange, where we get into full directory synchronization. And there are many different ways to run Office 365 in hybrid coexistence mode. I'm not going to get into that in this webinar. But you need to start thinking about how you're going to extend that information out to Office 365. So I'm going to jump into Microsoft's approaches in a second, but really, so there are free solutions, ADFS I've already mentioned, and DirSync from Microsoft to get you going on this. But also what Microsoft recommend is they do provide lots of integration with third-party type solutions, which we're going to look at in a second as well, recognizing that there are additional capabilities above and beyond what you can get with the free products from Microsoft. So there are two key areas we're going to look at here. The first area is the whole single sign-on, or federation as it's called in the industry. How do I provide integrated access to Office 365 and other cloud-based applications? I want to provide this single sign-on environment. What options have I got available? And this is Microsoft's own published recommendations here around this. And there are three approaches you can use to basically provide that single sign-on federated environment. The first one is use the free products from Microsoft, ADFS, that I've already briefly touched on, and we'll get into that in a second. But there are two other options available to you as well. You can use third-party secure token services, STS for short there, which provide the base same capability as ADFS, but also go above and beyond ADFS to provide additional capability like integrating with multiple cloud applications, mobile support, and other custom integrations that the different vendors can actually provide through the API sets that are available from Microsoft. Another option there is something called Shibboleth, which tends to be used in educational establishments as it is a free open source piece of software, but does require significant integration and coding to actually get the thing working. So today what we're going to do is contrast ADFS with the third-party secure token services, which companies like Okta actually provide as well as part of the Microsoft Solution Network. The second area, beyond the single sign-on and federation, is the directory synchronization area. So how do I synchronize my profile information from AD out to Azure AD and out to other cloud applications? So again, Microsoft provide a tool for Office 365 to synchronize AD out to Azure AD called DirSync, so we're going to look at that. But then there are other options also available to you as well. So partners can build custom Office 365 connectors that they charge for and provide additional capability. Or there are a bunch of APIs available as well through PowerShell and the Graph API that vendors can actually integrate into their own solutions. And again, I'm going to contrast here DirSync with Okta's approach using those APIs embedded in our cloud-based solution as well. So the great news here is Microsoft fully embraces and supports the identity partners to provide this additional capability, which gives additional flexibility around single sign-on and integration and directory creation and synchronization. And gives additional support capability around the Microsoft network as well. And if you look on the pages that are given here, Microsoft lists all the different vendors who are actually approved to provide this single sign-on integration service, of which, of course, Okta is one of those. And also talking about Okta, we're going to jump into Okta towards the end of the webinar. We also do provide not just services for leading cloud applications, as I'll get into, like Office 365, but we also have customers running a multitude of different Microsoft-type solutions today as well, like SharePoint, etc. So let's jump into the detail of Microsoft's approach here and have a look. So again, coming back to the diagram, we've got our Windows Server on the right-hand side there, Office 365 out there in the good old cloud. There are two things we need to do. We need to look at this ADFS part to do the federated single sign-on. So this means that users who are authenticated into Active Directory, once they're authenticated, they get a single sign-on experience and their access is federated out to Office 365 automatically. That's what ADFS provides for us as well. So we're going to have a look at that. And then making sure the profile information is synchronized from AD out to Azure AD. And again, that's where DirSync will come into play here. So let's have a look at both of those solutions. So the first piece, ADFS, is a free piece of software. You can go onto Microsoft's website. You can download the latest version of it. It's all well documented, how to install it. There's a planning guide. You can look at what you need to do here. And let's have a look at what the implementation guide would tell us to do. So again, this is all from TechNet, so information you can all get available after this webinar as well. So we have AD there running on our Windows environment behind the firewall. We want to integrate to Office 365. The first thing we need to actually do is download this free piece of software called ADFS and build this federation server farm. Now the big question comes up is, well, what's involved in setting up that federation server farm if I'm going to use ADFS? And if we start digging deeper, there are some things you need to know about when you're deploying this. The first thing is you need to deploy 2 servers here. Now the reason you need 2 servers is you need that for high availability. If you think about what ADFS is doing, it's federating a single sign-on out to Office 365 and potentially other cloud applications. Now, if that's not available, people can't access and single sign-on to those cloud applications, so you need resiliency and failover there for that. So Microsoft recommend 2 servers, and clearly you are going to need the hardware infrastructure to stand that up as well. So that means you are going to have to build those servers, maintain them, patch them, firmware update them, etc., and keep those servers running. So you might say, okay, we've got a couple of servers available. That's not too hard to get that going. The second area you need to think about is then what they call the federation server proxies. Now, the reason you need these guys is if you think about people accessing outside your firewall, they want to basically have a delegated authentication into Active Directory and be authenticated with their credentials behind the firewall. Then when they're roaming around on their mobile devices outside the firewall and they want to access Office 365 and other cloud applications, you need a way to federate that authentication into AD behind the firewall. And what that really means, and this is part of Microsoft's architecture, you've got to deploy these federation server proxies within the DMZ, which means you've got to again set up 2 servers minimum for high availability. You've got to set them up within the DMZ, which means firewall setup and working with a security team. And there's a bit of complexity involved in setting up that environment to provide the external access for people who want to be authenticated to AD behind the firewall. So Microsoft do provide recommendations for this. Depending on how large your organization is, they're recommending at least 4 servers for most organizations, but as you get to a larger organization, certainly going up in the region of 7+ servers as well. And again, remember some of those have got to be deployed within your DMZ as well. So that's the basic setup, but you're not done there as well. The other things you also need to set up is there's some configuration and transaction information that you've got to store as well. So that's got to be stored within an instance of SQL Server. Now, Microsoft recommends 1 instance here, but again, all of us who've done good enterprise architecture before will know that is a minimum of 2 servers really. So again, we're looking at setting up different SQL Server instances to hold that transactional configuration information. So the minimum configuration you're looking at to stand up just the federation environment to access one Office 365 tenant is certainly a minimum of 5, if not 6 servers within any environment to actually provide that full federated access to mobile devices. And there's some other things you need to think about as well. Any of you that have done a website with security before, with SSL, you'll know that you have to go to Certificate Authority and basically purchase a certificate for your website and set those up and renew those annually and pay for those certificates. Well, with ADFS, there are many different types of certificates. You've got the basic SSL certificates, but you've also got token signing certificates, communication certificates, decryption certificates, and you are responsible for going to your Certificate Authority, or your CA for short there, purchasing those certificates, putting them on all the different servers, and maintaining those and keeping those up to date and paying to keep them up to date as well. So the good news and the bad news is there's a great checklist for you to actually use. You can go onto the Microsoft site, and they provide a great checklist of all the different steps you've got to go through, and there's a deployment guide for every one of those steps. But the reality, as you can see, is there's quite a lot you've got to set up there. You've got to set up a lot of servers, a lot of software, maintain those servers, keep them configured, put them in the right environment, set them up with security, maintain certificates, and there are a lot of costs around just setting those up and keeping those going forward. If we look at an Office 365 environment specifically, though, again, this is from Microsoft, a Microsoft partner, you will see again here a typical example of what's required to deploy an integration to Office 365. So again, we've got other DCs, domain controllers. Again, we're running our instance of Active Directory there. We've got our ADFS internal servers and our ADFS proxy servers, and they federate the access out to provide single sign-on authenticated into Office 365. But the challenge starts to happen here, of course, when you're running multiple tenants. Now, many organizations who run in different countries, or they've got different operating units, maybe they've acquired lots of different companies running with different Office 365 tenants, or franchise type organization. I come across many organizations that are running many different Office domains for different tenant environments. Now, the challenge here with ADFS is you need to replicate that configuration information for all of those servers across every unique Office 365 tenant. So you can imagine it can start getting very complicated if you are running many different Office 365 tenant environments. And if we look at a real-world example of someone who presented at our customer conference last year, Post Holdings is actually a cereal brand company, so they do breakfast cereals, and they've acquired somewhere in the region of 15, 20 different organizations now, and the challenge they've got is they've all kept Office 365 tenants for each of those individual operating companies under the holding company Post Holdings. And if you look at, this is their own slide, by the way, and not mine, if you look at Post Holdings in the middle there, this is the architecture they were looking at just for the corporate side of things. They've got their own Office 365 domain, 2 ADFS servers behind the firewall, 2 ADF servers in the DMZ, the SQL Server database, and load balancers they're also putting in there as well. They acquired company number 1, they're about to acquire company number 2, and they had to replicate this configuration out effectively for each environment. And again, if you look at what that was really looking at over 15, 20 different companies, you can see here the headache that organization was potentially facing around setting that up and maintaining and managing all of that. Again, that's their own slide, not mine. So the reality is the true costs of ADFS is, whilst the software is free, you do need to set up all those servers, you do need to purchase all those certificates, you do need to configure, feed, nurture, and water all those servers, and there are significant costs in doing that. But then going forward, you've got to maintain and keep those servers up and running. So industry analysts have all analysed really what the true cost is of deploying ADFS, and typically in US dollars it's anywhere in the region of $25,000 to $50,000 to deploy it for one application like Office 365. But as you start deploying more and more tenants and more different applications, more and more cloud applications, as we say in Europe, the average is 8 applications now, you're going to see that cost start to grow and grow. And the big question, of course, is if you are going for cloud-based applications like Office 365 and others, then why would you want to deploy more hardware infrastructure on-prem to try and solve that particular problem when you're increasing your costs and infrastructure? So that's just a quick overview of ADFS. The second area to look at as well is DIRSync. So DIRSync, as I mentioned, again, just to remember, ADFS is doing that federated single sign-on. DIRSync, what that's all about is synchronizing profile information from AD out to Azure AD as well. So this is tied to your Office 365 domain, the tenant that you're running, and it synchronizes the user objects, group objects, etc. Between the environments. Now, for this environment, Microsoft also provide hardware recommendations here. Now, they're not as extensive as ADFS. If you think about what ADFS is doing, it's authenticating every user who actually logs on in and has to federate that access out to all the different cloud applications like Office 365. What DIRSync is doing here is something much more simpler. It's saying, okay, when a new user is added to AD, or when a user is changing groups, or when they're removed from AD, I'm just going to synchronize that information out to Azure AD. So the processing requirements are not as high here, and they do put recommendations as to what kind of server you would actually need for that. So you are looking at a server to actually run that, and again, you are looking at a SQL Server instance to store configuration and transactional information within that database as well. So when you start putting both of those together for Office 365, clearly with ADFS and DIRSync, there's a lot that you've got to maintain there, and by the way, you are responsible for keeping that up to date. There have been many releases of ADFS, etc., and you would have to keep that up to date, patch that, and make it available, and clearly that would take the service down whilst you do patch it as well. So they are considerations for you to think about if you do decide to go down that route of that free piece of software. It does require significant infrastructure and maintenance costs to keep it up and running and going. So let's contrast that with a different point of view, and I'll come back and compare them again at the end of this presentation. Let's just look at how Okta's tried to solve that problem. So Okta, for those of you who've not come across Okta, is a cloud-based identity and access management solution. It's built in the cloud as a multi-tenant solution, purely 100% cloud-based. And what Okta does is solve a very simple problem. It connects all your people, whether it's your employees, your contractors, your customers, your business partners, on the device of their choice, so whether it's their desktop, their laptop, their favorite tablet, their favorite smartphone, to the cloud applications that they need access to, such as Office 365, but also, as you'll see later on, thousands of others out of the box as well. But we also recognize that you do have integration requirements to your existing on-prem world as well as native mobile applications. And what we do is we just layer and leverage your existing investment in Active Directory and allow you to rapidly extend that out to the Okta Cloud service, so we can provide the authentication and access requirements, provisioning requirements to those cloud services like Office 365, and give seamless access to all those different people on the device of their choice wherever they need it. Now, what we look at here is, well, what does that really mean? If you look at the end user experience, LinkedIn is one of our customers, and LinkedIn spoke at our customer conference as well. When people joined LinkedIn, believe it or not, even though they're a cloud-based company, they would give out a piece of paper with anywhere between 20 and 40 usernames and passwords for people to access all their different cloud applications like Workday, Salesforce, etc. And I'm sure you can go around many of your organizations today and you're starting to see this problem now, whether it's stickies on the screen or under the keyboard or just pieces of paper in their drawer. People are really struggling as you start deploying 5, 10, 15 cloud applications to try and remember all the different logon credentials to all those different apps, and it really is a pain for the end user. So what Okta really does is it just simplifies that. We give one single sign-on through your Active Directory credentials, and then you are given access to a portal, which can be the default portal that we provide, or you can integrate it with the likes of SharePoint if that's what you're using. A single sign-on environment where you can just point and click and access your favorite applications through one login. And you get that same experience whether it's on your laptop, whether it's on your desktop device, or whether it's on your favorite mobile device as well, your tablet or smartphone. Another interesting thing is we also provide multi-factor authentication, which is also called two-factor or secondary factor of authentication, and that's becoming really important now in the industry. We're finding you hear about all these data breaches like Target and many others, the iTunes, iCloud hack as well recently. All of those could have been stopped with secondary factor of authentication. So you think about people can easily phish your username and password, and you could say, well, with single sign-on, people have only got to get one username and password, and then they've got access to everything, and that's somewhat true, and that's the risk. As people start simplifying their access to applications, then you need to definitely make sure your access to them is a lot more secure. And what secondary factor of authentication does is it goes beyond just the username and password and actually forces the user to enter a secondary secure token that's randomly generated and tied to that person on a type of a device. So we can integrate with things like RSA, semantic zip, or we actually provide our own service through text or as a native application on a smartphone as well to provide secure access to those applications. And as I briefly alluded to, we provide a default portal to provide that consistent experience across all the different devices that you want to use. But if you want to embed that and hide away Okta within SharePoint or other portal technologies you use, we've got many customers doing that today to provide all the authentication and access services to all the different applications they need. Why people tend to love Okta once they've deployed it is it's very simple to use, but one of its big value propositions is actually the amount of applications it supports. So over the years, Okta has built something we call the Okta Application Network. Currently that network supports over 3,500 pre-integrated applications like Office 365, but all your other favorite cloud applications like Salesforce, Workday, ServiceNow, Box, Drive, etc. They're all pre-configured and built and maintained and supported by Okta in our network. So the good news is you can add your own custom integrations as well if you want to. We provide a wizard there to rapidly integrate with your own integrations, and you can submit those to the community, and you can even submit them to Okta, and we'll maintain and manage those integrations so that you don't have to keep on top of those. And we monitor proactively with our operations center to make sure those configurations are running so you don't have to maintain all those custom configurations. The next question that normally comes up is, well, that sounds great, but how do you do it without any hardware on-prem? Because clearly, Microsoft's solution does require a lot of hardware on-prem to solve this problem. How does Okta solve that problem? And it's really, really simple, and I'd encourage you all to have a look at this after the webinar as well. So if we look at a typical environment here, we've got AD running behind the firewall there with our employees who log on locally through maybe their Windows devices or Mac devices. Outside the firewall, we've got our remote employees, we've got our cloud apps like Office 365, but maybe a bunch of others as well, and we've got Okta running as well. So the first thing we do is you basically download a lightweight agent, a very lightweight agent that you'll put on a member of your Active Directory farm, and you can put that on multiple members for high availability as well. So no additional hardware required. You just download and install this thing. It talks out securely to Okta using standard port 443, so there's no DMZ setup, no special security setup, and you're ready to go. So what happens is when the remote user comes in, and they try to log in with their credentials, and again, this could be through the default portal, it could be embedded in SharePoint or whatever you choose, the native mobile application. When they try and log in, Okta will recognize that this person is managed by this instance of Active Directory behind the firewall. And what Okta will do is it will delegate that authentication down through the agent and simply authenticate that user using their AD credentials. And if they're authenticated, we'll give them access to the appropriate applications that we'll look at in a second. Behind the firewall as well, of course, people who log in, let's say on their Windows desktop daily, once they're authenticated to the domain, we don't want them logging in again. So again, Okta's smart enough to know that that person is already authenticated, and again provides a single sign-on access experience out to those cloud applications so that the person doesn't have to actually log in again to any applications. And all of that's driven by all your standard policies that you have within your AD security groups. So as people join AD, we can provision them. As people leave, we can deprovision them, but certainly as they move around different groups, we can automate the provisioning and deprovisioning of different applications that they should have access to based on their group memberships. So it's really easy to get going. It's just a simple agent. You don't have to set up a ton of hardware, a ton of security setup, a ton of network setup, etc. You just download this agent onto your existing AD environment, set it up with Okta, deploy it on multiple members for high availability, and we provide that synchronization with AD and can automatically provision and deprovision, activate, deactivate, and move those users around, and provide that integrated single sign-on experience within your desktop, within the enterprise, and outside the firewall as well. To set it up, it's dead easy. You just, again, go and create your own instance on Okta. So again, you go to the cloud-based service, create your own instance for free that you can do, and you download the agent, put it onto your AD controller, not onto the AD main controller, sorry, you put it onto a member, not the controller, we don't recommend that. And then basically set up the credentials to talk out to Okta using standard 443. And once you've done that, you choose what information you want to keep shared between the directory and Okta service. We only keep very basic information within the Okta service. We only keep the first name, last name, a unique ID, and an email address. All the other information is kept securely with an AD behind the firewall. And then you choose what you want to actually share out with the service and how often you want to synchronize information. So it's pretty straightforward to get going. So what does it really look like? Well, the administration screen, once you get used to it, it's actually dead easy to go and add an application. And I'm just going to show you a couple very, very quickly of what the experience is for the administrative side of this. So this is replacing what you would have to do with all this ADFS type setup and DirSync. So let's pick an application. Office 365 is what we're here to talk about. So the first thing, there's 4 steps we're going to go through in the wizard. So first of all, we're going to Office 365. What's my domain? Which tenant am I going to point it to? So I just point it to my Office 365 federated tenant that's been set up. And then I choose about how I want to do single sign-on. So this is replacing the whole ADFS setup side of things, the whole federation around single sign-on. So we support all the open standards around single sign-on. Office 365, Microsoft recommend using WS Federation, and you would just click on that as the single sign-on option, and that will replace all that complex ADFS setup stuff. Then the user management, how do I want to synchronize profile changes, the creation, deletion, and group type stuff. This is what we call user management. So this replaces the DirSync type capability. So again, you just set this information up to point at the instance. And then finally, who do you want to have access to that? So again, you can do that by people directly, or you can assign by groups. So you might want to assign this application by different rules and policies, depending on who should have access to it. And that's it. It's pretty straightforward. So if I was doing the same thing for another cloud application, it's all familiar once I've done it once. For Salesforce, for example, let's say if I was going to add in Salesforce, I point it at the Salesforce instance, as you've seen there. How do I want a single sign-on to Salesforce? So again, the standard that's used for Salesforce is actually SAML versus WS Federation. So again, you just select that open standard there. Do I want to do user management? So again, the automated provisioning and deprovisioning of users within Salesforce. So this is where it goes beyond DirSync. DirSync is very much a tool that's focused on just Office 365. It doesn't do other cloud applications. So with Okta, you can automate the single sign-on and provisioning and deprovisioning to multiple cloud applications using this approach versus having proprietary methods just for one cloud application. And then who do you actually want to sign it to, again, as I showed you before. And then the end user gets a nice consistent experience, whether it's their desktop, laptop, tablet, smartphone, etc. Those applications are simply assigned. They log in once with their AD credentials, and once they're authenticated, they get single sign-on experience to all their different cloud applications quite seamlessly. Just a little bit more on the desktop single sign-on as well. How does that work? Well, when you log in the morning and you're authenticated to the Active Directory environment, basically the integrated Windows authentication side of things, we detect that person's been authenticated, so that when they go to access their cloud applications like Office 365 and their other cloud apps as well, they don't need to log on again. They're basically single signed on seamlessly into those applications without having to remember any usernames or passwords. So it makes it a lot easier for the end user to do that. And on the user provisioning side, which really helps with the administrating side of things, when you add a user or when you remove a user or when you change their group membership, the agent can detect that, and we can automatically provision that user out to Okta, but also provision all the cloud applications as well. So we can automate their accounts in Office 365, Salesforce, Box, Jive, etc., and create those accounts so that when they log in, they then get that single sign-on using their AD credentials, and then get seamless access to all of those different apps out there. And again, as you change those roles, they can also be added and removed from different applications. On top of all of that, Okta provides robust reporting on who's accessed what, where, when, so you have a good audit log of what applications have been accessed by who, on what device, etc. So you can see any suspicious activity and report on what's going on around who's accessing applications for things like auditing, licensing. It can help you with a lot of your licensing challenges. So if I was to contrast that, going back to where we started, if you look at the free software that's available from Microsoft, there is a lot of configuration required there. There are servers required behind the firewall within the DMZ for ADFS, and again, you need multiple instances of those, of course, if you're running many different Office 365 tenants. Again, it doesn't provide the rich functionality around mobile access as well, so there are other supplemental products you might need there to help with that. And then you've got the directory synchronization as well from DirSync that you would need to set up. If you contrast that with the way Okta's approaching this, we're saying you don't need to deploy any special hardware on-prem. There's none of this complex firewall setup, so no hardware required, no configuration, no maintenance, no special certificates, no deployment within a DMZ. Just simply download these agents, put them onto your member servers, set it out talking standard 443 using standard security, so no special network and DMZ configuration. Put it on a couple of member servers, you get instant high availability built in there, no load balancer required, and you can easily set it up and manage it for not just Office 365, but thousands of other cloud applications, as you saw in the example I gave you earlier on. And we can maintain that user management of provisioning, deprovisioning, and group membership as well for you for your Office 365 deployment. A common question I normally get as well from lots of customers is, well, we've actually got multiple untrusted Active Directory domains for us as well. Can Okta handle that particular problem? And we do that for many customers at the moment. So exchanging is a great reference for us here in the UK, doing exactly that, where you can go through these costly, complex directory domain consolidation type projects. But actually with Okta, what you can do is point all these untrusted domains to the Okta tenant, and we can recognize where those different untrusted domains are. So when the user comes in to authenticate, we can delegate the authentication down to the appropriate AD forest and validate those credentials and give access to the Office 365 tenant. So rather than having to go through complex domain consolidation projects for an Office 365 deployment, we can very much simplify that element as well. We're fully part of the Microsoft Partner Network, so we are validated by Microsoft support. We do co-work with Microsoft support, so we have full required capabilities that are required for Office 365 support. And we also go above and beyond that, and we also do support all the optional requirements. There's one there that we didn't have available, which was full integration with Link and native Outlook, and that was purely because the Graph API at the time didn't have that capability in it for us to use. We are releasing an updated version imminently that will actually have that additional optional support in there as well. So you can see we are fully accredited. We have hundreds of people deployed on Okta's network integrated with Office 365 in production today. So think of Okta as an easy way to solve a lot of your identity and access management solutions around Microsoft applications and any other web application you might come across as well. So it's not just Office 365, as I say, Box, Jive, Salesforce, Workday, whatever you might be deploying. Look at Okta as that service that can give you that simple, integrated, single sign-on experience manage all the provisioning, deprovisioning of all your different users, and provide the auditing behind it, making it easy for employees, contractors, customers and partners to basically be authenticated to your Active Directory services. And if you're looking at extending or integrating with SharePoint internally and externally, we've got many customers doing that at the moment, and integrating with all your other trusted and untrusted domains as well around your Office 365 deployment. So in summary, really, Okta provides three key benefits. It's increased productivity for the end user. They don't have to remember all these different account credentials. They get the single sign-on experience. It makes their life much easier. But also for the administrator, it makes life a lot easier as well. The whole automation around the account creation and deletion means that you don't have dormant accounts lying around, that when people leave the company, they still have access to data. So it makes everyone a lot more productive on both the administrative side and the end user side. It drastically drives down IT costs. We've had independent surveys done from Forrester showing that the ROI for many of these deployments is anywhere from 300 to 800% typically, but we've got many 1,000% plus deployments as well, because when you compare what you would have to deploy on-prem to do this versus a cloud-based solution, it's much quicker time to market and it's much lower cost to run. And because of a lot of that, Okta is a secure service. It's independently penetration tested. It's SOC 2 Type 2 certified. And customers like Gatwick Airport here in the UK, they've come across and done independent penetration testing, and they themselves have said they could not build anything as secure as what Okta's done. So we do make it secure for you so that you don't have to worry about all that complexity, and it means your organisation can focus on being innovative rather than having to worry about all the security issues that you're going to face as you try extending Office 365 and other applications from AD as you go down this cloud route. And if you look at someone like Post Holdings, what we've done is transformed that architecture on the left, and again, this is their own slide, to that one on the right, where we simply put a couple of agents on their AD member servers, talks out to Okta, and then that can manage all the integration to Office 365, but also all the other cloud applications they're deploying as well, like Concur, Zscaler, as you can see there, and many others. So really, organizations have a choice. They can go down the old route of doing things, of constantly deploying more and more on-prem hardware and software that they've got to build, maintain, support, and keep that going. Or if you're going down a cloud route anyway, such as the likes of Office 365 and other cloud applications, then why not look at a cloud-based identity and access management solution to do this? If you look at what Gartner and Forrester are saying, they're basically predicting that certainly within the next 12 months, 18 months, that 40% of all new deployments are going to be cloud-based identity and access management solutions versus on-prem. And the ROI is actually there for people to realize. Again, we have a document on our website you can download if you want to. Gartner have also recently produced a Magic Quadrant, and as mentioned earlier by John, we are the leader in that quadrant. So you can see there all the other vendors in there, and we've been chosen as that leader because of our customer adoption. And our customer adoption, as you can see from this chart, has literally gone through the roof. And it really doesn't matter if you're a 10, 20-person organization. In fact, our first customer here in Europe was actually a 30-person organization, all the way through to 100,000 type organization. You all get the same capability. It's basically a subscription-based model, so per user per month or per external login per day. And it means you all get the same capability. So whether you're a small company up to a large company, you can all get that same capability now that was only available in the old days to pretty much organizations that had hundreds of thousands, if not millions, to actually spend on these kind of solutions. So we've seen rapid adoption across all industries. We've seen certainly a massive uptake of authentications on the Okta network, as you can see there from this particular graph, and it's becoming a very relied on service across many different organizations. And again, it's not in any one industry. We're seeing adoption now in over 1,500 customers around the world. Been going since 2009, so it's been seeing very rapid growth across all industries here. I think one of the interesting ones there is actually, if you look at that second column, all the leading cloud vendors actually use Okta internally as well. So you look at people like Box, ServiceNow, Jive, Concur, Workday, NetSuite, DocuSign, SuccessFactors, etc. The list goes on, Zscaler. They're actually all using Okta internally as well for their own single sign-on and identity access management services, as well as many large and small organizations. So in summary, really think of Okta as the enterprise identity network, managing the authentications of millions of people, whether they're employees, contractors, business partners, customers, across millions of devices. We're doing that for, as I say, over 1,500 organizations today, and we already integrate rapidly to 3,500 applications. You can add your own, and we expect that network to certainly be over 10,000 applications in the next 12 months. So that's really what we do, and in contrast to what you've just seen from the free versions from Microsoft, I think hopefully you can see the difference there, that Okta is a 100% multi-tenant cloud-based solution that's always on, rather than you having to deploy, configure, manage and maintain all this different hardware and software from the free ADFS and DirSync type tools that are available. Goes beyond just integrating with Office 365, integrates with thousands of applications, whereas with ADFS you're going to get into complexities with multiple Office 365 tenants, but certainly as you add in new custom applications or other cloud applications, you've got to work out how to integrate those as well. And we automate the user provisioning and deprovisioning across multiple different cloud applications without the additional hardware and software. So again, DirSync is kind of focused on O365 and Azure AD, whereas we're focused on making that provisioning easy across all your different cloud applications as well. So I did mention at the start of the webinar, you can get this for free. Okta is free for life for one application, so you can go to okta.com/Office365 and you can create your own Okta instance for free, and you can download the agent and stick it on a member Active Directory instance and integrate Office 365 using Okta. As you start using multiple applications, there are different subscription models that you can subscribe to, but for one application it's free for life. So hopefully that's given you guys a very balanced, contrasted view of the options available for extending Active Directory for Office 365 and other applications. So for now I'll be more than happy to take some questions.
Okay, lovely. Thank you, Chris. Right, so so if you do have any questions, as mentioned before, if you could just pop those into the questions box, so that is at the right-hand side of your screen, and then Chris will answer those for you shortly. We have a question here from David. Okay, when can we expect integrated, is it Kerberos authentication for Fat Client Outlook 2010-2013?
Yeah, so that hasn't formally been announced when it's available. We do, so what I'll say is we have our customer conference called Octane, which is in the second week of November in the US, and there we will be making lots of announcements around some of our enhanced capabilities around Office 365. So I would be, if I was a guessing man, I'd say certainly within the next month you'll be hearing something on that one. So the API is now available. We've certainly done the development on that. It's just not been generally made available yet. So I'd expect it before the end of this year, to be honest.
Okay, thanks, Chris. So you have another question here. This is from Colin, who has asked, can this be used to SSO with a Citrix Zen Desktop published desktop?
Yes, absolutely. That's a good question. So another webinar actually we do run at Okta, and there is a replay I think on our website, is actually integration with Citrix specifically. So we have customers, many customers running with Citrix integrated with Okta. So yes, we have a full integration with all Citrix, and as you'd imagine, many other cloud applications as well. But Citrix, we've done some deeper integrations into Zen Desktop. So absolutely.
Okay, so we have a question here from Simon, who's asked, so with the full Outlook client support, will this support the CRM 2013 Office 365 client?
I'd have to check on that one specifically. So Simon, I will follow up on that one because I've not specifically heard anything specific around the CRM side of things. So I know we're providing, as required by Microsoft on the optional side, is the native integration to Lync and Outlook, but I don't know. I'd have to check on the CRM side. So that's one for me. I'll make a note of that.
Yeah, okay, perfect. Yeah, we'll make sure that's followed up.
Well, I mean, what I'd also say is it's easy to get going with this as well. Whilst you can try yourself, we're more than happy to come and obviously do a webinar, take you through a bit more detail, come and show you more on the product, and we can get into a work. We do offer out a business value assessment and a workshop as well, free of charge, so we can come and have a look at your integration requirements and see where Okta is actually a good fit. And so for example, if you're using SAP FAT clients, we don't integrate with those today. When you're integrating with Office 365, as I say, the only limitation at the moment is single sign-on from Outlook and Lync, but that's going to be sorted pretty quickly. So otherwise, we pretty much can draw out your architecture and see whether it's going to be a good fit, and in 99% of organizations, it pretty much is.
Okay, right. I think, Chris, that's all the questions we have today. So thanks so much for for taking part in the webinar.